focus with don't down living in the Caribbean. Hey, don't is in fact what it means happen. Would most likely have to do. I believe that many of having a roof over our heads, good job, or a sense of achieving some sort of personal idea of having a different team dealt to us. Today, this is a brand new year. Good news, exile. Insights will help us to really celebrate this new year. Insights that let me share with you 3 of these insights briefly in passing this deep prove to be meaning or relevant to our everyday life. And in my prayer, and it is my prayer that you will take note of them and pray over them and ponder their implications for us for the upcoming year. In the first place, one of the first things that we can discover from our lesson is the fact that we can live this new year. We have good news this year because we can live this new year on to God. Verse 1 of our lesson, fear not, for summoned you. And the point that the Lord is making is the fact that we belong to God because God has redeemed us. In a few moments we are going to come to the Lord's table. One of the purposes of us coming to the Lord's table is to remind ourselves of the fact that God has redeemed us. Or to say it this way, God has paid for us, or God has purchased us. He paid for us, He purchased us, and His Son redeemed us, laying down His life. In other words, God is saying to His people that we have been bought with a price. And it was a high price at that. So high until no one among us could sell. Therefore, God gives it to us. And therefore, we belong to understand at the beginning of this new year that we belong to God is because of the fact that life is so fragile. Life is so unpredictable and life is so unstable. It happens to us this year, we belong to God. We don't know what this year holds in store for any of us. For each of us, no matter what comes our way, it does not change or negate the fact that I am God's son. I am God's child. I have been bought with a price. Notice that our lesson reminds us of the fact He does. In other words, belonging to religious relation. We are religious. We are concerned about church matters. When we are our relationship with God, Jesus Christ. We have true bears witness with our God. Their names this morning. Our ears would be made assurance of the fact that comes out of God. Desire and to happen in our lives. It's good to know that God knows just how much we can bear and just how much we can take. God is always mindful mindful of the fact that we are but dust of the earth. And therefore, God has promised to never put more on us than we can bear. And the reason why this is so is because we belong to God. Every so often I need to remind myself that I am God's child. When trouble makes its way to my doorstep, I need to remind myself that even though trouble is knocking at my door and trouble is hot on my tail, it's good to know that I am still God's child. Cares and concerns of this life are too much for my little shoulders to bear. I have to remind myself that I am God's child. When things are not working out the way that I planned for them to work out, or the way in which I anticipated that they would work out, it's good to be able to remind ourselves that even though the bottom has fallen out of my life, that I am still God's child. I have been bought with a price. Even when the evil one is hot on my trail, I can remind myself of the fact that I have been bought with a price. And God has redeemed me with his own blood. It's good to know when sickness and death are all around us that we belong to God. And when fires are breaking out and thieves are breaking in, isn't it good to know that I am God's child? It's good to know beyond any shadow of a doubt that when we have to face all kinds of calamities, heartbreaks, letdowns, setups, and setbacks, it's good to remind ourselves that problems do not have the last say-so. Because we are God's child, God has the last say-so. It's literally dangerous and hazardous to our physical, mental, and emotional health for us to go through this year unless we have the assurance of the fact that we belong to God. Too much can happen to us over the course of a year for us to walk through this life all by ourselves. And so it's good to begin this year on a high note, realizing the fact that I have been bought with a price, that I have been redeemed by the blood of God, that God walks with me and God talks with me. It's good as I begin this year to understand and for me to remind myself that even when trouble comes, I can give God thanks anyhow, because trouble don't last always. It's good to remind myself that when I'm sick and when I'm afflicted, that God has reminded me that I have been bought with a price, and that by his stripes I am healed. It's good to know when farewell to friends are leaving me high and dry and stabbing me in my back. It's good to know that I have a friend like Jesus who walks with me and who talks with me. I wonder, have I got a witness in the house? Is there anybody that's glad to know that as we begin this year, as we begin this year with this political uncertainty, it's good to know that regardless as to who sits in the White House, that God is still alive, and God is still there. Isn't it good to know that God, talking about cutting this and cutting that, that we serve a God who declares that the cattle on 1,000 hills belong unto the Lord, and so he can cut as much as you want. But I stop by to remind somebody that God still will take care of us, and God still will provide. Heaven and earth. He walks with me, that he talks with me. Is there anybody who went through any heartache, any pain in your life, and you got over and you got through not because of you, but because God was walking with you, God was talking with you, God was reminding you that you have been redeemed, that you have been and give God glory and give God praise. Because we know that they that wait on the Lord shall renew their strength. And I'm not talking to church members. I'm talking about disciples of Christ. I'm talking about those who have been baptized in the blood of the Lamb. I'm talking about those who know that He walks with me. He talks with me. And to those of us who don't believe every now and again, just like we talk with Jesus, makes everything all right. And to those of us who know that He's better and better, and child share. I'm talking to those who know that He can make a way from the out. I'm talking about those who have been through the storm, those who have been through the fire, and you've been through it all, and yet you still have gone through with blessed assurance. Jesus is mine. Is there a witness in the house of God? I'm so glad that I can be here with the assurance that I belong to God. But there's something else that we can discover from our lesson. Our lesson not only reveals to us the fact that we can live this new year with the assurance that we belong to God, but from our lesson we can also discover the fact that as we begin this year, we begin this year with the assurance that trouble will not triumph over our lives. In verse 2 of our lesson, God says to us through the prophet Isaiah, when you pass through the water, I will be with you. And when you pass through the rivers, they will not sweep over you. When you walk through the fire, you will not be burned, and flames will not set you ablaze. Notice that our lesson affirms and underscores the fact that there are some of us who will have to deal with adversities in our lives. Some of us will have to pass through the rivers, and some of us will have to go through the fire during this upcoming year. But the good news is that neither the fire nor the flood will triumph over us. It's easy for some of us to forget as we fuss about the nonsense of a new economy, or the nuances of a new economy, and all of the other annoyances and irritations of a privileged people, that there are others among us who are or who will be experiencing real agony, profound pain, and great losses in their lives. There are some of us who, in a very real sense, will experience the fires and the storms of life. People all around us will be, or they are already passing through the waters of life. There are those who are going through the raging and overwhelming rivers of divorce, separation, death, depression, and job disillusionment. Just think of the couple whose marriage grows colder and colder and then finally shatters like a block of ice. Think of the young parents who lose a cherished child to a killer like cancer. Just think of the retiree who becomes isolated, depressed, and then suicidal, or the computer technician who makes a stupendous salary but who absolutely dreads the thought of going to his cubicle each day. There are others of us who are walking through the fires of life. There are those who are walking through the fires of family conflict, spousal abuse, financial difficulties, and life-threatening diseases. Just picture the frustrated father locking horns with his defiant teenager, and the 20-something wife who shows up at church with strange bruises and a chipped tooth, or the young professional who has maxed out his credit cards and cannot seem to pay his bills, or the middle-aged man who is slowly wasting away because of AIDS. These are all individuals who are in the rivers and in the fires of life. But there is good news. Our lesson reminds us of the over you, and the raging fires will not burn, and the flames will not set us ablaze. And you know why? Because God is there with us. In other words, no matter how many divorces, how many deaths, how many disillusionments, how many disappointments we face, nothing in this life can or will triumph over us, because God is with us. You can't be pulled down from our position as created, formed, and called and redeemed sons and daughters of God. Raging waters cannot do it, neither can fire. We can't even be dragged down by a psychotic boss or even an abusive spouse. No matter what comes our way in this life, we can always count on our relationship with God to sustain us, even through the variety of raging storms that may confront us. God has promised that He will be right there with us, and God is aggressively taking steps in our lives in order to guarantee that these calamities will not triumph over our lives. If you don't understand what I'm saying, let me break it down to you this way. I thank God this morning that trouble don't last always. Trouble will not last always. You may have problems, but I'll stop by to remind you that our God is bigger than your problem. You may have stress and distress in your life, but I'll stop by to remind you that our God is bigger. Our God is better. Our God lasts longer. Anything that you and I can go through in our life. And so I say, and even defiantly, come on 2017, hit me with your best shot. Profiling, police brutality, political corruption, crack addiction, drug pushers, gang bangers, inadequate health care, hunger and homelessness, and any other problem associated with this life. It's good to begin this year by reminding ourselves that no matter how big the problem, our God is bigger. No matter how bad it may look, our God is brighter. No matter what we are up against, our God is still giving us the victory. Come on and give God some glory. Come on and give God some praise. this good news for a new year. Third and finally, our lesson not only reveals to us the fact that we can live this new year with the assurance that we belong to God, and with the assurance that our troubles will not triumph over our lives. But from our lesson also reveals to us the fact that we can live this year, we can begin this new year with the assurance that God will bring wholeness into our lives. The most powerful and the most profound promise of our lesson is found in verses 5 and 6. God, through the prophet Isaiah, says to his people, I will bring your children from the east and gather them from the west. I will say to the north, give them up, and to the south, do not hold them. Bring my sons from afar and my daughters from the ends of the earth. Everyone who is called by my name, whom I created for my glory, and whom I have formed and made. In other words, God is saying to us that he is in the business of reuniting families, friends, and loved ones, and bringing about wholeness in our lives. God is promising to restore back to wholeness whatever is broken in our lives. If there was ever a time in human history when wholeness was needed, it is such a time as we presently live in. Someone has said that the paradox of our time is that we have more conveniences but less time. We have multiple possessions but reduced values. We have more degrees but less common sense. We have more experts but less solutions. We have fancier houses but more broken homes. We spend more but we have less. We have more medicines but less wellness. We have higher incomes but lower morals. We live in families that have two incomes but more divorces. We have wider freeways but narrower viewpoints. We've been to the moon and back, and yet we have a hard time crossing the street to see who our new neighbor is. And so we live in a time where wholeness is desperately needed. And the good news of our lesson is that God has promised this year that he's going to bring wholeness into our lives. God is going to bring peace to the troubled hearts. God is going to bring straightness or straight thoughts to the confused minds. God is going to bring love to cold hearts. God is going to make homes out of those who merely live in big houses. God is going to make men out of those who act like we are boys. He is going to make warriors out of those who are cowards. He's going to bring joy to those who are depressed, light to those who live in darkness, and give something to those who have nothing. God is going to let those in who have been locked out. He's going to pick up those who have been knocked down. God's going to lift up those who have been pressed down. God's going to bring justice to those who are victims of injustices. God's going to bring liberation to those who have been kept in captivity. God is going to heal those who are not only sick in their bodies, but sick in their minds and in their spirits as well. God is going to restore those who have been broken. God is going to give life to those who have been given destiny. God is going to give hope to those who are hopeless. God is going to give us joy that the world cannot give us, that the world cannot take away. God is going to give us peace that the world cannot provide. I don't know about anybody else, but I'm so glad that I begin this year with God with me, God for me, and God moving on my behalf. With good news. Good news. God is there. God is with us. God is for us. God is right by our side. God is right by our side. this new year with good news. Come on and give God some praise.